Thank you for signing up and for attending today's webinar. We're looking at accelerating financial services marketing. I'm Ross Jenner. I'm Sales Director for Be The Brand. For those of you who aren't familiar with Be The Brand, we provide workflow and digital asset management solutions specifically focused at financial services. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Lisa Wood. Let me just flip to the next slide and I'll do an introduction for Lisa. So Lisa has extensive experience in marketing, having worked in the marketing realm for 30 years, and has built brands, grown businesses, optimized marketing and performance in a variety of industries, including banking, fintech, travel, and legal services. Lisa's worked in private equity, startups, large corporate environments, so a broad perspective of business challenges. Lisa was head of brand at First Direct and spent 8 years as a passionate customer advocate, refreshing the brand's proposition for a younger audience. Lisa was also CMO at Atom Bank, where she spent 4 years building that challenger bank's brand, responsible for customer experience, proposition design, and marketing and PR. Lisa now works is a senior partner at Open Velocity, providing a wide range of marketing, advising on a wide range of marketing strategies, and we at Be The Brand work with Open Velocity ourselves. Lisa's been recognised in the Marketing Week's Vision 100 Marketeers and Campaign's Power 100, is also a member of a Customer Pioneer Network advocating for customer-led business change, and it's also a non-executive director. So Lisa has lots going on, and we're absolutely delighted that she's found time to join our webinar.
Yeah, great to be here.
Fabulous. So let's dive in. So let's look at the first question. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. We should have time towards the end to jump on those and answer any that we can. So, Lisa, having worked across different industries, as we've already mentioned, how different is it working as a marketeer in financial services as opposed to those other industries, and what are the main challenges of that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen, thanks for the intro, but from the intro you'll see a big chunk of my career has been in financial services, and I've seen it at every level. I've come across sort of the regulation and compliance at every level, because I've kind of worked my way up through lots of roles, starting at research, doing product, all sorts of stuff. But I think the biggest thing about working in the financial services sector is you have to have that awareness of what's going on in the regulatory environment, and you have to keep close to that, and you have to keep yourself informed. So it's kind of, it's another area that you have to be informed on, in addition to kind of all the usual marketing stuff that you want to keep abreast of. So, you've got to build it into your thinking all the time when you're delivering on marketing, and you've got to allow, that elongates processes, I think, in financial services. So you do get sort of longer sign-off times and kind of more people involved in sign-offs. Other things that differ when I kind of think of my time in financial services versus other industries, you've got to think of that very, very strong audit trail, because you will have regular compliance checks, and audits are just part and parcel of working in financial services, because there's a regulator overseeing everything that the business does. So you've got to have that mindset about kind of just having more process, being able to do the sort of audit stuff, and build the evidence for the marketing that you're delivering. You will get closer scrutiny, definitely. And I think that the other thing, and as this is probably more applicable to sort of more senior roles, but there are more consequences as well. So you have to go into it with a mindset of doing great marketing and meeting your regulatory obligations, because, you know, as you kind of get into more senior roles, you actually have to be approved to be deemed fit to do that role, and you are actually held personally accountable, not the business, you personally. So that's kind of quite a different sort of change when you're working in financial services versus other industries. And I would say you just got to have that closer relationship with your compliance colleagues. You've got to understand their challenges, you've got to understand their concerns, and you've got to work with them. You know, just have really healthy working relationships, I would say. That said, that's kind of all the negative stuff. But I think I've always thought and had a mindset about regulation is that it is a positive thing. It is there to protect customers at the end of the day. And I think as a marketer who spent the vast majority of my career sort of being incredibly customer-led and working in very customer-centric brands, it's like good marketing is just all about actually being very customer-centric anyway. So, you know, if you're delivering good marketing, it should be clear, fair, and not misleading, surely. You know, isn't that kind of something that you would want to deliver as a marketer, whether you're in financial services or not? And it's also about, you know, it's very much about understanding your audience. It's about translating what you know about your audience into marketing campaigns that are going to really, really resonate with your customers. Because if they're not resonating, then you're not doing a good job. So, you know, you should have the evidence there, because good marketing is insight-based. So the evidences should be there to help with that sort of regulatory process. Sorry, that was probably very long-winded.
No. That's all good. That's great. And I think you touched on, you know, some of the points that we're going to come on to as we go. You know, I think the key point there around, you know, good marketing is customer focused regardless of sector.
Yeah, it
is really important. I mean, in terms of sort of timelines, I think you touched on it a bit, but in terms of timelines and resource availability and certainly expectations from the business, are they any different whether you're in financial services or in travel?
I think you've just got to build into those timelines that, you know, that sort of, it is going to have closer scrutiny from your compliance team. And I think, you know, that depends, and again, we'll probably come on to talk about this, but it depends on the size of the project as well. So it's building into your timelines and understanding kind of that workflow to get something to market is what time is needed just to have that sort of compliance oversight. If it's BAU, it's quicker. If you're onto, you know, big multi-channel campaigns, then it gets more complicated and you need more time building in. So yeah, it does take longer for sure, you know, but it doesn't mean that you can't be agile, but you have to work closely with your compliance colleagues.
Okay, fabulous. So, I mean, customer-centric marketing. You know, how can you adopt, you know, this sort of customer-centric mindset, and how can that help financial services align more naturally, really, with the compliance requirements?
Yeah, and I've touched on this already, but I think the best marketing, and I've had this drilled into me from, you know, the get-go, particularly working in brands like sort of First Direct, is that, you know, good marketing should be insight-based. So if you want to make your marketing click with a customer and kind of, you know, trigger something in their brains that makes you think, oh, okay, that's for me, you know, it has to be insight-based. So that insight should be then focused on getting a good outcome, which is part of the regulatory sort of obligations. You know, getting a positive outcome should be aligned with understanding customers, having that insight, and then building your marketing around that insight. You know, how do you translate that insight into the messaging? Because that's kind of, you know, if you can evidence that again back into your compliance teams, it kind of all then makes sense why you're doing what you're doing. So, you know, and it should all be based around giving good outcomes for customers. So I'm kind of a really big believer in be insight-led in everything that you do in marketing, because the evidence then naturally flows out of it and makes the whole job of meeting your regulatory obligations so much easier. You know, you need to make sure your comms are incredibly balanced. You know, that's the whole, you know, can your customer make an informed choice off the back of your marketing or your communications? And again, it's kind of put yourself in the customer's shoes. It's a really easy job to do, you know, it's not an easy job to do because you need the insight, but it is an easy mechanism to use as a marketer to say, right, if I stand in my customer's shoes, does this marketing make sense to me? Do I, you know, based on the level of knowledge that I have, because I'm putting myself in the customer's shoes, can I understand the marketing in front of me, and can I make an informed choice off the back of that marketing? So, you know, again, this is kind of just it's just standard sort of customer centricity sort of driving the marketing process. Yeah, I think the other thing is, you know, you as a marketer, you have to be delivering on your brand promise. So your brand promise has to be experienced in practice. So when your marketing isn't aligned with what the actual experience is that the customer gets at the end of the day, then, you know, you're not doing your job as a decent marketer, because there's absolutely no point in pulling people through the door that are then misaligned with what you actually deliver, because one, they'll be disengaged, two, you know, they'll probably drift away, and you're not then, you know, building a sustainable business. And what you really don't want to do is kind of get negativity around your brand. So again, that's kind of another reason that, you know, you're being customer centric is about meeting your customer expectations and delivering that brand promise through the marketing that you do. You know, so I think they're kind of the key points. I think is that there's lots, if you take that customer centric path, it should naturally drive out the outcomes that the regulators are looking for in terms of kind of marketing delivery.
Absolutely. And that's certainly what we hear in the market and from our clients. You know, really interesting what you say about, you know, making sure you've got the right customers. You know, certainly in today's world, everyone has at least one broadcast channel, and you know, whatever medium they use in order to do that, you know, that, as you say, can be very damaging to a brand if you get disenfranchised or upset customers.
There's no point in over-promising from a marketing. You know, you can over-promise and get people through the door, but if that's not driving ultimate value for your business and brand, what's the point? So, you know, that internal, external expectation has to marry up. It's just a fundamental.
Absolutely. And sort of digging, I guess, a little bit deeper into that sort of customer insights and how they really can help, you know, tailor promotions or you know, help drive the compliance and marketing strategy to those different segments. You know, how does that really come to bear?
I mean, you know, we've always, if we're starting a marketing campaign, you know, you obviously have kind of your business objectives that you're trying to meet with any piece of marketing that you're doing, but trying to, you know, right from the get-go in terms of the briefing stage, it's trying to unpick what you're trying to achieve and how that aligns with the customers that you're going to be marketing to, or the audience you're going to be marketing to, and create your brief around that. Is where's the win-win? Where's the win for the organization? Where's the win for the customer? And how do we frame it in such a way that you know that what you've got to say is going to strike a chord with customers? And you know, it's just, in my mind, that's kind of what effective marketing is, and how you instill that right from the very sort of structured briefing process of your communications. I mean, actually, another thing that's just popped into my head is you've also got like ongoing insight all the time, haven't you? Because you've now got, we live in a world where we've got ongoing feedback, you know, so we know how people are reacting to things, and you can build that insight back into responses and you know, future actions of campaigns as well. So it's not just, you know, it's insight in a very, very broad sense.
Absolutely. You know, and as I said, I think that sort of rings true with a lot of what we hear in the market, and particularly, you know, when clients are looking to make sure that not only they take that into account, but certainly with you know, consumer duty and the requirement to be able to evidence that as they go through, and have that, you know, recorded within the systems that they use. I think that's
absolutely important. Yeah.
So I guess getting on to you know, the juicy bit, in terms of, you know, the collaboration between marketing and compliance. You know, what's your experience of you know, the relationship between the two? You know, I guess they are two teams. I know they work very closely. Yeah. Obviously, two teams, but working very closely together. What's your experience of the relationship between the teams?
Yeah, and I think, you know, sometimes this depends on the size of the organisation, doesn't it? You know, I've kind of worked in massive sort of First Direct, HSBC, big organisations where, you know, big marketing teams, big compliance teams. But I think it's about actually understanding who your day-to-day contacts are and how you can develop those relationships and keep close to one another. You know, the compliance team can be a fantastic source of keeping you up to date and flagging the, you know, the latest regulation and helping train the teams. And you know, so that mutual sort of keeping close and developing relationships and having sort of specific partners that you work with, I think can work really well. At the other end of the spectrum, then kind of, if I look at my Atom Bank days, when, you know, when I first joined Atom Bank, I was the only marketer in the business, and then we grew a team, and there was only sort of, you know, a couple of people in compliance, and it's like, so it's really easy to work in a very, very collaborative way in those kind of teams, because, you know, you're literally working side by side because they're small teams and very agile teams. But as in bigger organizations, you know, it's kind of, it makes sure you are, you know, understanding the kind of the key people, the key stakeholders that are influencing your work, and just, you know, have a great relationship. There is always a healthy tension, and there should always be a healthy tension, and actually that can be really useful at times. You know, marketing is there to try and push boundaries, and, you know, and try and be innovative and catch attention and all of those good things. And compliance are there to try and keep you on the straight and narrow. I said there's a natural healthy tension there, but I think, again, if you have those really strong working relationships and really focus on building those, then actually the two actually can really work well together, because they can understand where you want to go and why you want to push boundaries, and equally you can understand their sort of parameters within which you need to work to do that. And it's like you're both, at the end of the day, you're both wanting exactly the same thing, which is to get good customer outcomes. So yeah, I mean, my advice is just develop really strong relationships, and know when to pull people in as well. Don't keep them afar as though they're, you know, a barrier to you doing great marketing. Don't do that, because actually that can come and sort of bite you when you're trying to get things to market.
Absolutely. And in terms of, you know, what sort of practical steps could the marketing team take into sort of embed compliance requirements into their workflows? without compromising campaign
and I think
and impact of those.
Yeah, I mean, I've already mentioned training, and I think kind of just making sure your team and creating the space and feeding the knowledge in the team when it comes to regulation. Anyone who is in that process of developing communications campaigns, etc., needs to have an up-to-date knowledge. So the training piece of good financial promotions principles that they need to stick to needs to be solid. Again, as I said, use your compliance team can be a great asset in helping you do that as well. The other very practical point is build those principles into your briefs. So, a lot of the time you'll be briefing agencies or you'll be briefing in-house teams to help you, do the copywriting, develop the creative, etc. So when you do your briefs, build those constraints into the brief. So they're, right from the get-go, people are fully aware of, what the outputs need to kind of be able to tick the boxes of. So the other thing is, we work with some great agencies. And we work with great agencies who had a real understanding of financial promotions and financial services. And the more you build those sort of stronger relationships with agencies, and again, they become sort of educated in what's needed to get work signed off, so that continuity of relationship can really help, because your agencies know your briefs are, clearly stipulated, your team are well trained. All of these things then kind of make that workflow just sort of not super easy, but easier. It eases that flow. And I would say, get input at the right stage. I think compliance can be seen as a tick box exercise at the end of the road. It is way easier if it isn't a tick box exercise at the end of the road, because it can trip you up when they go, actually, no, this, we've got a concern about X, Y, and Z. So, and I think that's particularly true of big pieces of work. So, and again, in my time, we've done really big, very costly TV campaigns, multi-channel campaigns. You don't want those things being tripped up at the end of the line. And so, actually, in terms of the workflow, it's just build in checkpoints with your compliance team. So, if you're doing TV, as you get the storyboards or as you get the scripts, run it past them, get early advice on what are the legals you have to have on screen, what are, it's just kind of this ongoing dialogue, so that you don't get to a big point of time when you do a da-da moment, and then you kind of find, actually, I need to go back and do some changes on this. So, that's kind of the bigger pieces of work. The other thing that kind of just crosses my mind, and this is kind of this sort of isn't what I've been out of financial services now for a fair few years, but in the work that I now do, and I still work with financial services clients through Open Velocity, but thinking now about sort of how AI could help those processes as well. It's quite easy now to run particularly copy through AI interfaces and kind of go, can you just build a series of prompts that can check for, is this, does this messaging comply, is it fair, balanced, not misleading, etc. There are certain things that you can kind of use AI to check for even before you get to sort of the compliance sign off. So I think, I think increasingly, and we'll probably come on to talk about this, but increasingly, I think there's stuff that we can start to build into through AI and use AI for, that will kind of help flag things as they go along.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and I think we'll definitely touch on AI because what webinar wouldn't wouldn't be
Yeah,
complete
yeah,
without touching on that
exactly. You can't
a
have
little
a
bit later.
discussion without it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in terms of at what stage to get compliance teams involved, I think you've probably covered it a little bit,
Yeah.
but is there any magic bullet of you must always do this, or is it a bit of depends on what you're doing really?
I've always found that kind of in a larger organization, you've got very, very defined sort of workflows and processes and sign off stage gates. But I a lot of that I think depends on what it is that you're signing off. Is it day-to-day comms? Is it kind of small pieces of communication, or is it large scale projects? And I think it just the size of the project and what you're doing, and whether it's BAU or whether it's brand new. If you're just kind of repeating stuff that's been signed off before, and it's a much easier job than developing absolutely sort of new big creative campaigns, etc. So I think the day-to-day is just kind of you've already worked that out, or you should have already worked that out with your compliance teams about just how that process works, what the SLAs are, how long it's going to take. But then with the large piece of work, as I said, I think it's just the closer the relationship and the more collaborative involvement, the better. And you've just got to kind of you've got to use your judgment, haven't you? I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. And I think it's really important that recognizing, as you say, that different things might follow a different path and require different levels of sign off depending on if they're brand new and a large new product or a large new campaign, as opposed to something that just needs to be refreshed and pushed back and quickly reapproved, then that could potentially follow a different workflow, albeit still making sure that it's auditable and has the right sign-offs, etc.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. As you suspected, I think we're pushing in on time, so let's move on. And we've touched on this already, really, which is just sort of balancing creativity with speed and the constraints of that. So how do you think marketing teams can remain agile and innovative while working in sort of these regulated environments?
Yeah, and I think I've never been put off and push boundaries and be innovative because of working in a regulatory environment, and because actually some of the brands I've also worked for have been very much of a challenger mindset. We have always tried to push those boundaries, and I can think of some great campaigns where our compliance team got deeply uncomfortable. But but that's so I would say kind of don't go in with the mindset that you have to be super conservative because you are working in a regulatory environment. You still need to do your job as a marketer to try and push those boundaries and be creative. But the easiest way is going back to that sort of making sure that you have evidence and that what you're doing is actually insight based. It goes back to the being customer centric in my mind anyway. Is if you are trying to push boundaries, but you're doing it because there is a real reason to push boundaries, make sure kind of all of that evidence is in the brief up front. Why are you taking this approach? What are you trying to be sort of push the boundaries of, be provocative about? But that usually, you can usually get some really strong evidence that sits behind that as to why you're doing that. And that actually quite often, particularly in financial services, going back to sort of when I was working in it, is you were trying to change customer behavior, because actually changing customer behavior was the right thing to do for customers. as well,
Yeah.
because they, a lot of it, there's a lot of lethargy in financial services. There certainly was. If I rewind to some of the campaigns we ran, we were trying to do it for the good of the customer, because actually they were missing out because they weren't managing, their finances to the best that the market could offer them. So, do it with that evidence, do it collaboratively, and get input along the way. In terms of agility, again, working at speed, it's much better to get it right first time than it is to have to keep going back and reworking. So again, go in with that mindset of get it right first time. So if you're going to get it right first time, get the input, know what you're up against, make sure you're building in, those compliance checks that, understand the concerns of your compliance team, work with those concerns, don't ignore them, because, they are the barrier to you getting the work signed off. So, getting it right first time. I don't know if it's still the same, but we used to have, because you've got kind of all your audit trails and all of that was kind of very much sort of logged and system led. We used to have SLAs in place that would say we had to meet as a marketing team, and we would put these into objectives for our teams as well. Is like, you have to get a set percentage of your campaigns signed off first time. And if you're not getting your campaigns signed off first time, then that can be a concern. So, it's a good, having an SLA percentage is a good indicator of whether people are understanding regulation, and building that into the briefs, and, learn where things aren't signed off. What's that process of why wasn't it signed off? What do we do about that? Learn it and build it into your process for the next time, so that next time it does get signed off first time. So, learn, train the team, feed it back to agencies, because they're part of the loop as well. So it's kind of this, make sure that your machine is well oiled, and well informed, and trying to hit the tick boxes first time round.
Absolutely. And yeah, certainly we see that with our clients. A number of them have KPIs around right first time, and as you say, the SLAs on that. That's really critical, and reporting on those and learning from those, and letting that inform, as you say, if there are areas where training is required to bring people up to speed, then that's a really good way to go about it. So we've talked about sort of the creativity, and balancing that with constraints of compliance. But what about balancing creativity with the some of the constraints in terms of ad formats and different channels that are out there, and the constraints that they put on you as a marketeer?
And now you're dealing with so many different formats, and some of them really small formats as well, in terms of today's marketing, and particularly in the digital space. But I think in that digital space, that can really work for you. So I think one of the hardest things when you're working with smaller formats or restrictive formats is getting your messaging really clear. You've got less space to do it, so you've got to make sure your words are really, really right. So that needs quite a lot of discipline to make sure your messaging is strong and very concise, because it has to be. And the other thing is kind of what legals do you have to have on your ads, and again, working with compliance team to work out what works in what formats and what's acceptable. In the digital space, I think that I say it works for you, because if you're taking someone through to a landing page or to your website or whatever, you can use that space to cover off what you need to cover off, in terms of some of the regulatory stipulations on legals, etc., and terms and conditions. So, you know, making sure the journey works is really critical. I think when you're starting with a restrictive or a smaller ad format, look at the journey, look at how the journey actually informs and meets the regulatory requirements. You know, I was looking at, I've just been doing a project for a new bank, and we were looking at all the sort of Chase Bank social ads, just to have a look at what's the minimum that, you know, that they're kind of working with. They literally have sort of the legals on the bottom of all of their formats are just literally UK resident 18 plus. Right. So, you know, really nice and simple, you know, work to get that as simple as possible. And, you know, the other thing is, you know, you quite often need to have authorised and regulated by the FCA on your format. So again, but if they're super small spaces, can you not have that in a super small space and have that on the landing page and the website? So it's kind of, it's working through all of these scenarios with your compliance team. You know, the creative that you, or the media that you use can really help as well, because you know, you can use multiple formats to actually build a message. So it's actually use the media that you're using really creatively as well, because that helps you tell the story. So, you know, if you've got multiple digital ads on, you know, on a page, you can use all of those ads to help get your messaging across. You don't have to do it in one. So think of them about as a suite of ads that together ladder up to tell your story and get the messaging, you know, really clear. So, you know, you can just have to be creative in lots of different ways. Carousels in social are a really good way, because you can kind of use multiple frames to tell your story. You can do the same with banner advertising, and I would kind of also say, like, just have a whole load of A/B tests going on to make sure your messaging is clear as well. So, you know, some messaging will be, you know, if you A/B test, you'll know that actually some messaging is resonating much better than others. So that sort of use the testing, use the creative, use the media.
Excellent. All good points there. So let's you know, gaze to the future a little bit, or the now as well, I guess. In terms of, you know, emerging trends, can we still call AI an emerging trend? I'm not sure.
It's on us. It's on us.
You know, how do you see AI and other things, you know, shaping really financial services marketing in the next 12 to 24 months?
I mean, I'll start with a sort of a broad, you know, not just financial services, but just broadly. You know, AI is going to reshape marketing very, very quickly. So, you know, we've kind of know that it's, you know, helping us with content creation. It's helping us with sort of image reformatting. It is also going to get much, much stronger in terms of giving us insight, you know, using data, being able to dig deep into data that we can't make human connections around, and give us deep level insights that we can act on in marketing. So we're going to be working in a much richer, I think, insight environment, which is a great thing. I think, you know, your ability then to take that insight and use that to apply that and personalize your communications more and make them more relevant is the critical thing for me. Is AI is going to help us do all of this stuff, and it's going to speed the machine up, and we're going to be able to, you know, do it at the drop of a hat. So that landscape is changing incredibly quickly, and I think you're going to see that change at pace. You know, I'm talking in the next 12 months. I'm not talking in the next sort of 2 years or something. I'm talking the next 12 months. I think you'll see a significant amount of change coming through, particularly if you're in a larger organization where your organization will be investing quite heavily, I would have thought, in AI right now. I think the challenge for financial services is, how do you remain compliant in that environment. And I have no silver bullet on that. So, I don't think any of us do, but we're going to have to think very much about how are we building compliance, checking into what is being auto-generated for us, because the ability to auto-generate and have workflows and agents that are just executing our campaigns on our behalf without sort of that human interaction is coming. So, how do you build those compliance checks alongside the AI? I think is a big question. How do we train that AI to work within the constraints of regulation? And that's kind of where, compliance need to come to the table and help solve those problems as well. And I'm sure they are absolutely sort of thinking about that as these things evolve. And then there's kind of like, where do we draw the line on AI application and human monitoring as well? Because we still have to make sure that what we are saying is accurate, right, relevant. I always think, data is brilliant and gives us loads of insight, but it only tells part of the story. You always know that. I'm a kind of researcher at heart. That's where my career started, and I kind of know the difference between qual and quant research is very different. You need to be able to dig into the data and understand what it's telling you, and understand that at a personal level to really understand kind of what it is that, and I just think there is that kind of, the other thing we need to watch out for is kind of, data tells a partial story. And when we're trying to connect as marketers at a very, very human level, where do we draw the line? Yeah. So, because you really, really want your communications to be hitting the mark. And, as I said before, relevance is hugely important. You can be personal, you can personalize communications. If they're not relevant, it's not worth doing. It's relevance that's the critical thing. So, yeah, they're kind of some of the things that I think, it's definitely, AI is shaping marketing significantly. And there's lots of big questions that we need to answer around that.
Yeah. I think that's a great point you make around, using AI in terms of, interrogating the data and telling you information about it. But it's still, that marketing being a sort of human to human experience, then you still need the human on top of that to interpret it and really make sure that it is right and you've got that right message. So I think that's a really good one. Okay, we are up on time, as I thought we might be. So
went so quickly.
Quickly go to the final one, final screen here. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you, Lisa, for attending today. It's been really insightful, and thank you ever so much for your time. A quick plug for something that we have for Be the Brand. We have a guide to simplifying regulated marketing compliance. That is going to be available shortly. We will give you details, everyone who's attended and registered, as to how you can get hold of that, and get some really good insights from that as well. We'll also make a recording of this webinar available to you, should you want to distribute it and share it with anyone you know. I think another plug just for something that you're doing next week, Lisa.
Yeah, so if you're interested in knowing sort of a little bit more about Open Velocity, we're running a webinar next week. We are taking the top talked about trends of 2025, and we're kind of stress testing them to kind of go, where do you put your effort in 2025? So there's lots of talk on trends, but actually we're kind of pulling them apart a little bit. So we're running a webinar next week on Thursday, if anyone's interested, and you can find the details on LinkedIn or on our website.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for attending today. Thanks again to Lisa. You can find me or Lisa on LinkedIn, or obviously via websites, etc. All it is to say is thank you again for spending your time with us, and hope you have a really good rest of the Friday.
Yeah.
Thanks ever so much.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.